Thank you. I feel welcome. Give me a second while I get the simulcast set up. We are simulcasting on Facebook as well as YouTube Live. So I'm just going to need just another minute to get all of that sorted.
Absolutely. So I'll just walk you guys through it then. So I am Sunny. I am the director of marketing at Exponential. I'll be one of your co-hosts today, and we have a number of really incredible guests. We'll be speaking with Salim Ismail of OpenEXO, Rob Richards of Key Living, Fred Pye of 3iQ, Jos Schmidt of Neo, Peter Paul Van Hoken of Front Funder, Nick Cowan of the GSX Group, and of course, James Wallace of Exponential. If at any point during this broadcast you've heard enough, you are convinced, you are leading in the direction of the digital is the future, and you want to take some form of action, then feel free to head over to exponential.io/DAF. That page is specifically set up for attendees of this webinar to be able to get more information, potentially book a call with somebody on our team if that's what you're interested in, learn more about the Digital Asset Fund, anything like that. So again, that link is exponential, exponential.io/DAF. How are we doing, Corey?
We're doing terrific. 60 attendees in the room. We're expecting over 700 attendees today. At least we had over 700 registered. I don't know if everyone will make it. They're certainly not heading out to Disney World today. Everyone's sitting home staring at their computers. We're really looking forward to providing some amazing content today. We've got people joining from all over the world. We had registrations from South Africa, from Argentina, from the UAE, London, Munich, Russia, all over the US, all over Canada. Truly a global community all coming together to talk about some really exciting and important stuff.
Beautiful. Corey, you see our special guest panelist has joined us?
I do not see.
Okay, well, you keep taking a look while we wait. Again, thank you, everybody. We are moments away. From getting started. Very, very excited for this. Again, thank you so much for joining us. We have over 700 attendees registered for this live webcast. Very, very exciting. That's not including the people that we are restreaming to on YouTube and on Facebook. So very, very excited to have this illustrious cast of characters here to talk about the future of finance being digital. So, Corey, are we ready to begin, sir?
We are ready to begin. Why don't we start with Kyle Fry?
Wonderful. Not our other panelists?
Nope, I don't see him in here.
Okay, great. So Kyle, welcome. Everybody, this is Kyle Fry of Exponential. He's going to do a little introduction to everyone here. So Kyle, welcome to the webcast.
Kyle, you're muted.
Hey, Corey, could you grab that, please?
Yep.
Can you hear me now?
Clearly.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Great. Perfect. Well, we have a lot to cover in the next hour. As Sunny mentioned, I'm Kyle Fry from the Exponential team, and thank you for joining us today. There is no question that we are living in extraordinary times. With all that is going on around the world, Exponential, along with the speakers from today, are working towards creating an abundance of financial inclusion and value creation. At Exponential, we like to say the smart thing and the right thing are the same thing. We've spent several years and millions of dollars building, including bringing together a team of passionate industry experts, including value investors led by Stephen McClurg and strategic partners such as today's speakers, which has all culminated in today's event. Today, we launched the Digital Asset Fund. I can tell you on behalf of the Exponential team that we're both very excited, but also relieved for this launch. The Digital Asset Fund will allow folks exposure to digital assets to the world's largest and most well-known asset classes, such as real estate, venture capital, precious metals, stocks and bonds, and digital currencies. Importantly, however, we're structuring the Digital Asset Fund to allow access to everyone possible in a compliant manner on a global basis. Now, let me say that again. Allow access to everyone possible in a compliant manner on a global basis. We believe this is a pretty unprecedented opportunity, not only in its type, but also in the global reach. But today isn't just about the digital asset fund or Exponential. It's about showing you what the like-minded futurists have been building together, changing the way that society integrates technologies and how capital markets can be better, cheaper, faster. The speakers are top-notch, and we are fortunate enough to be an investor in most of them, but more importantly, a strategic partner with each one. Today, you will see how this all fits together with a conclusion by our co-founder and CEO, James Wallace, and creates a bridge to a new, better world. I'll hand it back to Sunny now.
Oh, that was fantastic. Thank you for that wonderful intro. We have another late edition special guest speaker joining us today. We're very excited to introduce James Ton, co-founder of Exponential. Corey, if you could please unmute his microphone and bring him into the chat.
Hello, can you hear me?
Clearly.
Awesome. Well, I just want to say welcome to everyone present and all those watching this recording in the future. It took 3 years to get to this day, 3 years of imagining and building and investing. First, we invested millions to build Exponential's team of 20 mission-driven, values-aligned, highly intelligent, crazy talented experts and professionals who make Exponential and this launch a reality. Then we created strategic partnerships across the planet with the leaders and companies we were hoping to. And lastly, we invested over $10 million of our own money into amazing companies that are now part of this fund. And I'm excited for you to see the quality of those innovators that we invest in and meet a few of them today. And on behalf of our whole team, I just want to say a special thank you to James Wallace, my co-founder at Exponential. We could never have had this launch without you and your undaunted determination though many told us that what we were doing was impossible. So thank you and much love. I'll pass it back to you, Corey.
Fantastic.
Yeah, that was amazing. Thank you, JT.
All right. Well, I think we've dispensed with the intros and we're ready to get into it. So again, everyone, thank you so much for being here for the Future of Finance Digital, this live webcast event that's going to celebrate the Digital Asset Fund launch with us. We're going to be hearing from some incredible speakers. They're going to be covering, let's move this forward, and I'll go through that now. So from the founder and CEO of OpenEXO, Salim Ismail, is here to speak with us about transforming the world for a better future. We have Rob Richard, the founder and CEO of Key Living. He's here to talk to us about digitizing residential living. Fred Pye, the founder and CEO of 3iQ, Canada's leading digital asset fund manager, is here to speak to us about digital asset funds. Jos Schmidt, the co-founder and CEO of the Neo Exchange, is here to speak with us about redefining the role of a national stock exchange. Peter Paul Van Hoeken, founder and CEO of Front Funder, is here to talk to us about democratizing the private sector investment model. Nick Cowan, founder and CEO of GSX Group, is here to talk to us today about presenting today's markets with tomorrow's solutions. And then finally, to bring it home, James Wallace, our co-founder and CEO of Exponential, is here to talk to us about intelligently investing in humanity. Very, very exciting. So as we move forward, just a couple of points before we get started. We do have moderators inside of the Zoom chat, which I see a number of people are here. Also inside of Facebook where we're streaming this. So if you have any questions at any point during this, please feel free to put those into the chat in Zoom or the comments inside of Facebook, and we will have our live moderators do their best to answer all of those. If those questions are not answered, no worries. We will get an email out to you guys with the answers that you asked. We're really going to be diligent about that. So that's one piece. During the webcast, if at any point you're interested in taking some action, you've heard enough, you are leading in the digital asset direction, and you want to learn more about what we're about, what is available, what options are there, you can head over to exponential.io/DAF. I'll say it again, exponential.io/DAF. And that's a page specifically set up to talk about the digital asset fund for attendees of this webinar so that you can get a deeper understanding of what's going on here, what's available to you. You can learn more. You can set up a call with one of our specialists, or you can read more on your own or get immediate access. So please head there. You'll notice that along the bottom of all of the slides, that link is also there. So if at any point you forget what it is, just look to the bottom of the slide, you'll see it there. Now, after the webcast, you will be redirected automatically to a page where you can sign up to get the replay link to this video, request more information, set up a call with us, etc. So you will automatically be pushed into that room after this. So no need to remember a URL for that. And if you are a member of the media, firstly, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. we've arranged a separate media Q&A room for you that'll take place directly after this webcast. So as you're going through this, when we actually have the conclusion to this webcast, please head into the media Q&A Zoom room that we set up. That would have been the second link inside of your original registration email, so that we can make sure you get all of your Q&A questions answered. Also, if you're interested in doing a one-on-one with James Wallace or any other of the guests here, please email me directly, sunny@exponential.io, sunny@exponential.io. All right, let's get into it. So I will hand it off to Corey to talk about the disclaimer.
Yeah. All right. So many people are going to get to talk about so much really fascinating, exciting stuff. And I get to do the legal disclaimer. Hooray for me. The content contained in this presentation is for informational purposes only. You shouldn't construe anything as any legal, tax, investment, or financial or other advice. The only advice we are providing is for everyone to wash their hands and quarantine with their loved ones until the madness in the world is over. I also recommend that if you've never had the chance before, that this is a good chance to try to grow a beard. This is 4 days growth for me so far. And I feel like it's working out pretty good. So it's my first beard. I'm assuming everyone's had a chance to read the disclaimer, and we shall move on. I'm looking forward.
I see in the comments, people are pretty impressed with your beard, Corey. So thank you.
Oh, terrific. Thank you so much. 4 days.
Beautiful. Okay, moving forward, we step into the opening for our first speaker. So speaking to us about how exponential acceleration is breaking the world is Salim Ismail. Now, Salim is the co-founder and chairman of OpenEXO, a board member rather of X Prize Foundation. He was the founding executive director of Singularity University. He founded PubSub Concepts and Angstro, which was later acquired by Google. He's also the former head of Yahoo's internal incubator, Brickhouse. He's an incredible guy, an author, has an amazing book out there. And I want to take a moment to speak to us about how exponential acceleration is breaking the world. Salim Ismail. Salim, thank you for joining us.
Great to be here, and super thrilled to be part of this overall group. I think the mission and the trajectory are really powerful, especially for what's happening right now. You heard a bit about my background. My journey really starts at Yahoo, where as the head of innovation, I learned a really fundamental lesson, which is when you attempt disruptive innovation in a legacy environment, the immune system attacks you, right? And we get stuck in a kind of a political fight. And it's bad in big companies, which is why they have difficulty innovating. But it's even worse in the public sector, where existing policy is the immune system. Taxis are fighting Uber, and bankers are fighting Bitcoin, and so on. And almost all the work I do now is based on that. Went from that to doing Singularity, where I learned about what's happening actually in the world today. And there's a really fundamental distinction, which is right in the name of this organization and a lot of our initiatives, which is the exponential part of it. You look at Corona, it's an exponential problem, right? We're doubling cases every 2-3 days. And it's a really bad way of learning exponentials, because they sneak up on you and you go from 100,000 to 200,000 to 400 to 800. All of a sudden you're in the billions before you even know it. And you can see really, really clearly the countries and leaders that understood exponentials and planned for it, and the ones that didn't. It's in stark contrast today. And so it's really critical to understand that framing, and part of why I'm excited to be part of this group is it's built into the DNA of this whole organization and all of the ecosystem that JT, JW, and team are putting together. So this is the key part of it. So then I wrote a book called Exponential Organizations on how do you organize for this new world. All of our organizations in the past are big pyramid style hierarchies geared for slow incremental progress. And now the train is pulling into Black Swan Central, and you need a totally different way of building organizations. And we noticed that over the last 10 years, we're building organizations in a completely new way, where the organization can scale as fast as technology can scale. So that led to the book Exponential Organizations. Can we go to the next slide? And the ecosystem that we run really drives off this particular idea, that in the 15th century, the printing press, the Gutenberg printing press, fundamentally changed the world. And we call that now a Gutenberg moment, because it completely changed society. In fact, it took 100 years for us to fully absorb the printing press. I argue today that we have more than 20 of those happening at the same time. Just solar energy completely changes the world. right? All energy generation changes fundamentally in the advent of that. Blockchain fundamentally changes the world. CRISPR or drones or 3D printing, all of each one of these. And the enormous challenge and opportunity in front of us is how do you absorb and take advantage of that? And the mechanisms and the institutions and the organizations that can absorb this innovation and take advantage of it will do very, very, very well. And the ones that don't get wiped out very, very quickly. And if you look over the last 10 years, the Googles, the Facebooks, the Apples, the Amazons that have taken advantage of this doubling pattern, this innovation, are doing unbelievably well. And literally they take off in that sense. And cognitively, this is very hard for us to get our heads around. I'll use the example of Alibaba's big shopping day last year, their big e-commerce day, where they sold $38 billion worth of goods in one day. And I will suggest that we human beings simply cannot get our heads around that number. Like, you just can't grok it. It just you can't conceive of that number. It's just a label that's there with a bunch of zeros, but it's so ridiculous that you literally can't cope. And so we just go, oh yeah, that was a big number. But try visualizing that number and you could get a sense of it. And that was one day, right? And so this is the biggest forcing function that we've seen, that we have all of these technologies facing us. And what happens is we get a backlash to them. People moan, I'll use autonomous cars. People talk about the shopping cart, a problem of, okay, if an autonomous car had to pick between a grandmother and a baby and it had to pick one of those, which one would it kill? And we get in this stupidity of that kind of a discussion when we're killing 32,000 people a year with drunk drivers right now. My favorite stat about driving is, for those of you who are old enough and have Blackberries, there was a 3-day Blackberry data outage a few years ago. And during that 3-day period, the accident rate in Abu Dhabi dropped 40%. It just fundamentally showed that people should not be driving. We are terrible control systems for 2-ton cars going at high speed. So the possibilities that would get afforded by autonomous cars are unbelievable, but we have this immune system reaction going, oh my God, that car might kill somebody, ban the car, right? We don't look at the broader effects. So how do we absorb this? And that's essentially what our ecosystem works on today. Next slide. And so what we work on is based on the book, where we're building organizations in a completely new way. We've built an entire ecosystem that focuses on solving this immune system problem. Because if we can actually figure out ways of absorbing technology better, we create unbelievable value around the world. Next slide, please. And the biggest thing that we have, actually, could you go back a slide? I'll just talk through what we have here. So just as for people's benefit, what we have here is the model that we aggregated for what we call exponential organizations that are delivering 10 times better, faster, cheaper than their competitors. They all have what we call a massive transformative purpose. And they scale super fast. They use externalities like the ones on the right, where Uber doesn't hire its own staff, TED uses community, et cetera, et cetera. And then there's a bunch of internal mechanisms like the lean startup methodology, decentralized org structures, and so on. And some combination of these builds you a totally new type of organization. The most dramatic one that we've seen is GitHub, which was the highest rated exponential organization we ever saw. They use all 11 of these characteristics fully. Microsoft bought this company for $7.5 billion a couple of years ago. And here's the killer. This company has no assets, no workforce, no intellectual property. Okay. And so this is what we mean by the digital age. If you're not building one of these, what are you doing, first of all? And secondly, if you can build that much value in a seamless way, something magical is going on that the rest of the world doesn't understand. I was talking to partners at Ernst & Young, and they're like, we don't even know what we'd put on the balance sheet for something like that, right? For an acquisition like that. So this is the big inflection point between what was before and what was going after. And I will argue that Corona is a singularity. It's a complete disruption of the status quo. If you look at the global perspective, basically we've connected ourselves economically over the world. We have global supply chains, economic interdependence, free trade deals, etc. But we've not connected ourselves politically, culturally, emotionally. And now we need to do the work to do that, because the economic fabric has been broken. We actually need to figure out how to cohesively operate as a globe. The coronavirus is not partisan or tribal in any nature. It goes after everybody equally. And so this is the huge danger. Next slide. And I'll just close with this. So we have an ecosystem where we have a private practice that solves this immune system problem for big companies. And we have a nonprofit that solves this problem for the public sector. We worked with the mayor of Miami on solving public transportation, for example, in transforming that. And then we have a community of consultants that's about 4,000 of the top technologists, organizational thinkers, lean startup gurus, data scientists around the world. And in the face of what's happening, we decided to kind of go for it and say, okay, we have two futures in front of us right now as a global species. We have a Mad Max future or we have a Star Trek future. We're kind of heading down the Mad Max future right now. And if we don't figure out how to tilt that the other way, we're going to have a problem. And Corona, given that everybody's had to stop, gives us time and an opportunity to shift that super tanker. So next week, we're having a 3-day global summit, galvanizing the top leaders in the world. The president of the UN, Maria Fernanda, is going to open it up. We have multiple heads of state participating. We have the top technologists in China and Africa participating. The Minister of Oceans in Indonesia talking about that. And we're going to do 3 days of some of the leading thinkers in the world talking about and galvanizing a movement to go after this transformation. And with that community of might be up to 100,000 people, we want to give them tool sets for transformation and then let them go transform the world. We can then support using both tool sets, but also new funding mechanisms like we're finding with Exponential. And that's part of the reason I'm so excited about what everybody's doing around this digital fund, and the mechanism now digitizing legacy environments will allow us the pace and acceleration to match where technology is going and really allow us to fund some of these opportunities. I'll just end with a small example. We're partnered and we have a small partnership with a company out of Miami called Wellways, which has created an 8-inch pad about this size to detect breast cancer. A woman wears it on left and right side of her chest for about 10 minutes at home. You take a picture of the resulting outcome, and it does a very extensive temperature sensing of that part of the body, and then you upload that. It turns out to be 80% better at detecting breast cancer than a mammogram. Cost $20, so you don't have any radiation or anything like that, and it's FDA approved. Okay? And so now we can essentially eradicate breast cancer by just giving this to everybody in the world and letting them solve for that. And that's the kind of breakthrough solution where we want to get funding for that, rapid acceleration and deployment, and have a massive impact in the world. And so that's what we can achieve if we connect the product and technology side with some of the incredibly innovative funding mechanisms and financing structures that we're creating with this group here. So that's why I'm so excited. So back to you guys, and super thrilled to be part of the group.
Salim, thank you so much. That was fantastic. It sounds like an incredible event. I know that a number of our team members are going to be attending.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, and I'm also looking forward to the Star Trek future as opposed to the Mad Max. What about you, Corey?
I saw that. Yeah, Star Trek over Mad Max any day.
Beautiful. Well, thank you, Salim. And let's move this along. So our next speaker, let's jump in. So welcome, everybody. Rob Richards. Rob is a 25-year tech operator. He has 10 years of experience as a VC. He was the COO of NASDAQ-listed eCruiter, which was Canada's first SaaS company. He's here to talk to us today about digitizing residential real estate. Everybody, join me in welcoming co-founder of Key Living, Rob Richards. Rob, thank you for being here.
Thanks so much, Sunny. It's a real pleasure to be here with everyone. You can sum up my entire career in 2 words, which is digitizing stuff. That's what I've done pretty much my whole life. At Waterloo, in my physics degree, I majored in digital signal processing. I spent the next dozen years building digital telecom infrastructure in the transport layer of the internet. And I spent the next dozen years transforming industries at the application layer of the internet using software, built our own data center. There was no cloud back then. And then I spent the last dozen years as a VC at Plaza Ventures with my partners. And really we've done ad tech, we've done fintech, we've done e-commerce, IoT, mobility. To sum all of that up, it's really about using computing power, machine learning, and communications to improve the flow of information, of goods and services, and of people. And that's what we've invested in. And we've seen over the last couple of years this nascent prop tech industry bubble up, where everybody's working toward how to improve the built environment and how we live in it and work in it and play in it. And it's a great industry. It's really attracted our attention just because of who we are and the fact that we're within Plaza Corp, which is a large condominium developer. There's a natural affinity. And so this led to a great partnership with Alphabet's Sidewalk Labs. We last November announced Quayside Venture Partners, which is a VC fund that'll be focused on investing in prop tech. And we'll be creating an Urban Innovation Institute, which will be an ecosystem build mission where we want to create companies and technologies to help build a better urban fabric. And not just in Quayside, where Sidewalk Labs has brought so many amazing innovations to their ideas and proposals on rebuilding Toronto's waterfront, but exporting that technology around the world. And so for the last 5 years or so, I'll get to the formation story of Key. I've just had this growing discontent as a guy, living inside a condo shop and being a technologist and used to transforming industries. I've realized that condominium is an industry that desperately needs transformation. Residential real estate is. And I ride my bike around the city 5 or 6 hours at a time, twice a week. And that gives you a lot of time to observe and to think. Next slide, please. So let's speak more to my discontent and talk about the problems with the condo industry. The first one is that we've been building for investors since 2008. We can't, capital rushes in where it's needed, and I'm not blaming anybody, but the fact is that our young people are stuck on the rental treadmill, renting from the wealthy investors who have bought up all the condominiums in Toronto. And this is true of all global cities. So they're locked out of the investment they want, the low risk investment that their grandparents and parents built their wealth on. And it contributes to the growing wealth divide rather than trying to take that down. Second big problem is a misalignment of interests. Developers don't think like owner operators because they develop to build and sell to investors. So that results in a couple of problems. One is that we're not building sustainably. We're not investing in the energy and water stacks necessary to reduce our environmental footprint and build longevity and take down costs. And the communities that we're building really feature isolation, which is a growing problem. It's like a top 1 or 2 problem for millennials and Gen Z living in the city, this sense of isolation. So rather than community and community-centric lifestyle, we're building in isolation. The third major problem are the inefficiencies and risks in the system. From an inefficiency perspective, it's a fragmented industry. We build one building at a time, then we hand it over to a volunteer condo board with an unaligned third-party manager. And it just creates a situation that it should not be managing a $300 million piece of infrastructure. There's a lot of costs in there in capital formation and in retail sell-through, as much as 10 or 11 or 12% that don't need to be in there. And these costs are passed on to the end consumer. And third, there's a rigid mortgage product that is layered on top of all of that with high risks that come with it and very high cash outflows. And we saw in 2008, the systemic issues in the mortgage industry really brought to light with the credit default swap and all the bullshit that Wall Street did. But since 2008, we've been building for investors and not end user residents. And COVID is just fanning the flames of this issue. So it really is time for systemic change. Next slide, please. So let's talk about our why at Key. Our mission, you can see the mission statement there. And we're starting with high-rise condo because it's what we know very, very deeply. We have a lot of expertise there, but it's also where the affordability problem is the most acute. And interestingly, it's where the investor returns are the greatest. So we'll talk more about that. But for this slide, I would just ask you 2 questions. 1, why can't a nurse live in the city in which he or she works and do that while building a financial future? Certainly not happening now. Question number 2, I'd say, why can't a young person in North America or Europe or Asia or South America, anywhere around the world with $500 to invest, participate in this asset class? It's been the best performing low risk asset class on the planet for as long as we can remember. So why can't that retail investor participate? Those are the 2 questions. Next slide, please. So let's look at what we're digitizing here. And the mortgage system and the paper deed system goes back a long, long way. The first glimmers of it occurred in the Norman invasion of England back in 1066. Thank you, William the Conqueror. And people started to see over the years maybe a way out of serfdom and a way into some other kind of participation in owning a piece of land on a farm or owning a piece of the village that you live in. And the settling of the American West in the 1800s really gave it a new impetus. And people were encouraged to get out there and stake land, literally with a stake in the ground. And then they would get a paper deed given to them. And then they'd get bankers to loan them money to buy the tools and the livestock and the seeds in order to eke out an existence. And in the 1900s, the American government really drove the concept home, the concept of the modern mortgage, with multiple programs throughout the 20s, the 40s, 50s, really driving home advertising and creating these mortgage industry companies like Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac in order to allow their citizens to build wealth where they live. But this system was built on paper deed and bank debt, and just look at how filled with friction it is. 42 steps to buy, 16 costs, 9 recurring costs, and 8 major unknowns. You could get capital calls. What's going to happen to interest rates? So there's time, there's cost, there's hassle, there's risk. There's 7 or 8 middlemen with their hands in your pockets at every step. It just does not work for today's consumer. So with Key, when we're digitizing real estate, we come down to a process now that is only 4 steps, and it's only 1 cost, and it's only 1 recurring cost with no risk for the individual. And that's what digitization can achieve. So if the current system doesn't work for today's consumer, what does? Next slide, please. So our value proposition is based on combining the true benefits of owning with the freedoms of renting, and then even more freedoms. When you look at ownership, what does it really mean? The first thing is it means you have equity that grows, I'm reversed, up and to the right with the value of the underlying real estate. The second thing is you have security of occupancy. Nobody can knock on the door and give you that 60 days notice. Nobody can create a rent eviction or their daughter's going to University of Toronto, so you're out, which happens thousands of times per year in downtown Toronto condos. And the third thing is that you have a pride, you have a rite of passage, and you have the comfort of your own home and your ability to customize it. You feel like it's your place. So when you add value and take care of it, that's growing your own bottom line. And then we talk about the freedoms that we crave, really that the mortgage product just doesn't work for anybody anymore, and the high monthly cash outflows associated with it. We need lower transaction costs. We need to get rid of all the friction and hassle and time and cost associated with buying and selling. And we need mobility on short notice, the freedom to get up and go. I mean, LinkedIn says that people coming out of university now have 4 jobs in their first 10 years after graduation. And usually a couple of those are associated with a move. So why do you want to tie yourself down with a mortgage product where you're not really building any equity for the first 3 or 4 or 5 years when you're moving every 4 or 5 years? It just doesn't make any sense. Okay, so how do we pull this off? Next slide, please. How does it work? First, we create an investable asset class out of the now fragmented condominium industry. And we allow wealthy investors to use their capital to buoy up our young people instead of keeping them out and down. So we sell half to investors and then half to commercial debt, and that funds the purchase of these entire buildings. And then the second thing that we do is we create a digital asset-backed security with smart contracts instead of paper deeds and a residential tenancy act and paper shares and a condo association document and a condo act. I mean, all of this is just, nobody can read this stuff and consume it and understand it. And we'll make it simple in a digital contract, digital smart contract that says, here are your rights and obligations, and here's what we're going to do for you. Third, we implement a stable trading system with share price tied to NAV, not to investor sentiment. So we will provide managed liquidity through a redemption feature initially, and then through a bulletin board that folks like Exponential and GSX will help us figure out, where we'll manage a global trading activity 1 day per month. But the concept here is that the price is always fixed at the underlying value of the real estate. So no volatility with the public markets. You know when you make an investment in this security that it's tied to the value of the underlying real estate. And that is a fundamental principle of Key. Fourth, we create a whole new user experience for our residents to to build their equity up by and reduce their cash flows. The more equity, the less monthly payment that you make, similar to paying off a mortgage, and to interact with the buildings and all the service providers that give them daily service. The important point here is the economic flywheel that we're creating. So the more that you can convert a loyalty point from your favorite grocer into equity, well, you get three things happen. You get more shares, you get a higher price per share for everyone, and you lower your monthly residency payment the next month. It's like this triple whammy of value creation. Fifth, we use technology to have a fully digital user experience and community-centric business processes to really create a radically elevated lifestyle in a diverse and vibrant community. We want to have nurses and teachers and firefighters alongside tech workers and alongside empty nesters. So, age and gender and job application and diverse backgrounds to really create new communities that we'll be excited to live in. Okay, next slide, please. So basically my time is up. I'll leave with a glimpse of Key's user experience. You can read the text there. But we're really, really excited about what we're building. I just want to say many thanks to our team at Key for implementing this new branding over the last 4 or 5 days on sort of a 27 hurry up offense. I hope everybody loves it as much as we do. And then special thanks to the Exponential team. They're big believers in Key. First, they're investors in our company. Second, they're strategic advisors to us. And we're working together to bring our digital asset-backed security to market. So thanks, JT, JW, everybody else on the team, and back over to you, Sunny.
Thank you so much, Rob. That was fantastic. Oh my! As somebody who just purchased a house, it would have been nice to have taken a look into this solution earlier.
We have so many people say that to us.
Yeah, wow. Okay, so Corey, what was your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'd like to be able to buy a house and then be able to move to a new house via an app on my phone.
Absolutely.
Or move into your house by clicking a few buttons on an app on my phone. You have an extra room for me.
Always, Corey.
Yeah, everybody wants to move to Texas.
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody, thank you so much for being here. I know that I'm seeing a lot of questions happening inside of the Zoom room Q&A, which is fantastic. Keep those coming. We have moderators in there getting answers to your questions. I don't see Facebook in front of me right now, but I'm sure that there's a whole flurry of activity happening there. So thank you for being there. And again, if you at any point you are like, okay, Rob sold me, I'm ready to take a look at more and what this fund is all about, you can head over to exponential.io/DAF. It's on the bottom of every slide. Okay, moving on from here, we step into our next guest speaker. So coming to us from 3IQ is Frederick Pye. Fred started his career listing gold, silver, and platinum certificates on the Montreal Stock Exchange. He created quantitative and international investment products at Fidelity Investment Canada. He listed the first long-short mutual fund in Canada, is on a quest to launch the first Bitcoin fund in Canada, which I believe is happening at the moment, and is here to speak with us about being Canada's leading digital asset fund manager. Frederick Pye, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Sunny, and thanks for having us, and thank all the people at Exponential for including us. That little picture that you see on the bottom left, right-hand side of your screen is a picture of me in 1986 when we succeeded in listing gold, silver, and platinum certificates on the Montreal Exchange. And that took over 3 years of negotiating and working with the regulators to get that fund up and going. So you fast forward 35 years later, it has now taken us 5 years and over $5 million to finally list the very first Bitcoin fund on the Toronto Stock Exchange. And the IPO ended today at noon. It lists tomorrow morning at 9:30. And now all Canadians will be able to look at and buy Bitcoin in their RSPs and their TFSAs in a regulated, tax-efficient structure. So it's just been exhausting, but we want to thank everybody for their support.
You're getting a standing ovation in the background. That's amazing.
Yeah, it is. It has been a lot of work. So next slide there, Sunny. So the story on getting that fund and to tell people, explain to people how complicated it is. I became a Bitcoiner in 2015 through a relationship I had with a guy by the name of Chris Berniski. His book is in my background with Jack Tater. And the problem is investment advisors didn't have a product to be able to offer, Bitcoin to their clients. And most of the wealth of everybody is held in retirement accounts. And so we decided to say, let's go on this quest to list the very first Bitcoin fund in the world. And we looked at different structures and, potentially doing a reverse takeover on the Toronto Stock Exchange. But we met with the OSC and they said, you know what, we want to be first too. So we immediately filed in 2017, and we didn't get a formal rejection until 2019. But that formal rejection allowed us to take them to a public hearing, which we did last summer, and we won the public hearing. We filed in December, and we just closed at noon today. And as I said, it lists tomorrow. During all of this, though, we also got involved with Canada Stable Corp as our partner, and we listed the first digital Canadian dollar called QCAD that can be found on over 11 different platforms in Canada right now. And as I said, the Bitcoin fund will start trading tomorrow. Next slide. So the Bitcoin fund, as we mentioned, is OSC regulated. There is a prospectus that everybody can download from our website. It starts tomorrow at 9:30, and the stock symbol for those that are taking messages is QBTC.U. We can put that on the chat. QBTC.U. You'll be able to see it trading at 9:30 tomorrow morning. We've got world-class custody with Gemini, which is the Winklevoss company out of New York. Our auditors are Grant Thornton. It is a closed-end fund. You can buy and sell it all day long, but there are annual and monthly redemptions if you require. But most importantly, again, you can now put Bitcoin in a tax-free savings account or an RSP. It is priced in US dollars, and the Class A units are the ones that are going to trade. Now, more importantly, is we also manage the 3iQ Global Crypto Asset Fund, which at the time currently owns Bitcoin, Ether, and Litecoin. But more importantly, the Global Crypto Asset Fund is now going to be a dedicated fund that will have much broader objectives to be able to buy all kinds of different digital assets, which we will be part of the Digital Asset Fund. So we are absolutely thrilled to be the ones managing the long-short component of the Digital Asset Fund for these crypto assets. So we're absolutely excited to be a part of it. And again, QCAD is the digital Canadian dollar that you can go and download or visit any of the major platforms in Canada to see. So we are really excited about the work that we've been doing with Exponential. They are owners of our company. And more importantly is the entire infrastructure, what Exponential has brought to us. You can also right now go to Front Funder and you can see 3iQ doing a private equity financing on Front Funder. So if you like the fund, you can actually buy part of the fund manager on Front Funder. We are listing this Bitcoin fund on the Gibraltar Exchange, hopefully in May. So now they'll have offshore access through and European access to this fund through the Gibraltar Exchange. We've had this fund on NEO for the last 3 years. So we have this great evolution of business that we do with all of these people at Exponential, and we're just thrilled to be a part of the whole organization. Thanks. Back to you, Sunny.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you. That was fantastic, Fred. Very, very exciting. What a cool time to be on this webcast with that launch coming. Okay. Corey, how are we doing on comments and chat? Do people, I see a lot of things popping up here.
Yeah, tons of people engaged. We've got dozens of people watching the simulcast and on the other channels. And seems like everyone's having a great time. I know I am.
Beautiful. Okay, let's lead into our next speaker. Again, thank you so much, Fred. Moving on into NEO Exchange overview. So our next speaker is Jos Schmidt. Jos is the CEO of NEO Exchange. He's the he formerly formed the Alpha Stock Exchange with a number of other blue chip financial institutions, was the executive vice president and global head of capital markets for a professional services company that was focused on the financial services industry. Here today to talk to us about redefining the role of a national stock exchange is Jos Schmidt. Jos, thank you for being here.
Thank you very much, Sunny, and great job. All Dutch people and people speaking Afrikaans will appreciate the effort of saying my first name so well.
I had a lot of homework this week, but I got
He
it.
can
practiced
imagine.
it no less than an hour of saying it over and over again. I'm so glad he finally got it.
Very impressive, very impressive. Yeah, let's maybe move to the next slide. And what I would like to start with is tell you a little bit about our story and our background and what we have done so far. So, NEO, in fact, is a pretty new stock exchange. It started operations less than 5 years ago, and the entire vision behind it was to come with a different way of servicing the industry, servicing the capital markets and the economy, where all the focus would be on doing what is right for investors and capital raisers, whether they are corporates or whether they are asset managers. Maybe move on with the slide, Sunny, so we can see the next. Yeah, thank you. That's fine. And when you look at what we've done to achieve that, in all the services and all the products that we came with, we always sought to implement fairness. How do we make this environment fair? Because there's not always a lot of fairness applied in the capital markets. How do we make products that are available on exchanges more liquid? How do we make them more tradable, more accessible? How do we make the ecosystem more efficient? How can we reduce operational risk? How can we reduce costs? And how can we give investors and capital raisers a good and better experience? How do we make them successful? Investors in building wealth, capital raisers in finding the financings that they need to grow their companies, grow the economy ultimately, and help, with employing people. So if you look at the circle to the right, you can see the journey that we went through over those 5 years. We first started with trading. We established a marketplace where you could trade any Canadian listed security. Once we felt comfortable that worked well, that we had the liquidity and that the mechanisms we put in place to make the markets more fair, like we have quite a few interesting components in there to prevent predatory trading strategies, to amplify better liquidity, and just name it. We then started to think about the next phase, that how do we get data of our exchange in as many places as possible? And had a very aggressive outreach campaign to data distributors, data vendors, platforms that provide data. And that was very crucial for us to start our listing business, because if you can't see data, it's very hard to have people list with you. And we started our listing business. That happened a bit later. I think we had our first listings in 2017, if my memory is correct, and steadily built that out. So first with exchange traded funds, and then with corporates. And again, differentiating ourselves by big focus on liquidity, not listing companies that are not ready to go public. We think that exchanges globally allow too many companies to go public that shouldn't be public. Focusing on helping companies with investor outreach, awareness, just name it, and giving them excellent service, helping them through their day-to-day issues. Moving on, we said, what else can we do? Well, what else we can do is, where are the other inefficiencies? And we saw inefficiency in the mutual funds world, where it is very expensive to distribute mutual funds, and that translates itself into a cost for the investors. And we came with a new solution there. We call them platform traded funds. You experience buying mutual funds that are not listed on exchange in the exact same way as if you would be buying them on a stock exchange. This is starting to show a little bit of us moving in digitization, making processes that are kind of manual, old-fashioned, replacing them with new streamlined digital solutions. And then the last development we had is called DealSquare, and DealSquare is a platform we created together with Peter Paul, who's going to be talking later on. And it's a platform to support the distribution of private placements. And that is probably our biggest step forward in digitization of financial services or offerings, in the sense that you can now, as an asset manager, come with a private fund, or you can, as a corporate, come with a private placement where you're public or you're private corporate, come to this platform, and we provide distribution, and distribution to everyone, distribution to all components of the ecosystem. It can be institutional, it can be investment advisors, but it can also be any type of retail investor. And I will leave it to Peter Paul to talk more about that, but everyone can now participate in a private placement. Think about that from a perspective of how we democratize access to capital by doing that. Isn't it frustrating when you always see people participating in offerings at an early stage, and you as a private investor can only get access to it when it's public? Well, that changed with Deal Square, and the process is totally electronified. If you look at the right, you can see the progress we've made, how we've executed. On the trading side, we now represent almost 12% of all trading in Canada. If you move on to the next, if you click once, if you look at our listings, if you look at our listings, we are now close to 100, and you see at the bottom in yellow, you see exchange listed funds. In pink, you start to see the growth of our corporate listings. And we had an incredible listing at the beginning of March that really put us, I would say, on the map globally. If you move on and you look at PTFs and Deal Square, which are both powered by our technology called NeoConnect, you can see assets being raised, close to 1 billion raised through that platform. And the very tiny purple piece that you start to see emerging in 2020 is the first private placements that we have enabled. So here again, step by step, building it up, growing it, and we see a lot of acknowledgement. People wanted to see change in our space. I think we brought change, we brought disruption. It always, doesn't go without some challenges, some issues, and some people getting a little bit unhappy about you. But I think we are creating an entire capital markets environment that is going to be more fair, more transparent, more efficient, and more democratized. Looking then at the way forward, if you move on, Sunny, to the next slide, what are we looking at for the next 5 years? Well, of course, continuing to grow the businesses that you saw before. That is a clear path, and we see a lot of opportunity to grow those businesses, and not only make them available here in Canada, but look at how we can have other participants from outside of Canada also leverage our businesses. And we have some interesting developments in that space, but we also have ambitions in the entire digital finance space and the entire asset digitization space. Now, what I always say, we've been looking at this, we've been talking with many parties for the last 3 years. And what I always say is, we want real solutions. We don't want anything that is driven by hype. And one of my favorite views about that is to say, we need to separate the signal from the noise, which is also a recent song of Simple Minds, by the way, for those who know Simple Minds. And that is what we've done. And our focus is going to be on solutions in our offerings that are going to continue to execute upon our core principles, upon our core vision that I mentioned earlier. It has to be efficient, it has to reduce costs, it has to reduce risks, it has to make capital markets better. I think there's incredible opportunity to unlock billions of dollars that today are blocked in settlement systems through collateral management, that can be reinjected in the capital markets, that can unlock value for investors, for corporates, for many stakeholders in our economy. Our focus is also digital assets. So we are not, from our perspective, focusing on the cryptocurrency space. I think there's a lot of great plays in that space present. Digital assets and fiat stablecoins. What I expect to see, and I haven't heard any comments about that yet, I expect to see that we're going to start to have some central bank digital currencies emerging also. And that is an element that we're going to keep a very close eye on. The principles about rolling out our digital strategy are going to be, I already kind of mentioned it, quality over urgency. 2, making sure that we integrate with the current ecosystem. Let's be very clear, everyone. The assets today are in the current ecosystem, and we need to make sure that we build the bridges between the current ecosystem and the ecosystem of tomorrow, so that that transition is smooth, and that we can really leverage all those assets in the current ecosystem in the one of tomorrow. We are very focused and make sure that we are aware and understanding the regulatory and industry constraints. Regulatory constraints, a good example that you all have seen is the entire ICO space. It showed incredible growth, and we have seen it peaking in 2018, but you saw it dropping back in 2019. That should not have been a surprise for many. So you have to understand the regulatory intent. I'm with Fred. I like to have a good discussion with the regulators. I don't always agree with the regulators, and we can do incredible things with them. If we are persistent, then we can convince them. But we also have to understand the principles that drive them and live within the principles and make them change sometimes on the way they approach things in a too non-business focused or too check the box way. And that is where we have to change them. But we have to understand the principles that underpin what they do. And I'll give you a good example. We were the first exchange to list a company that invested about 90% of its assets in cryptocurrency, and that was a result of us with that company and the law firms and the bankers doing a number of meetings with the regulators. And that listing, the company is called EtherCap. That listing took place now, what is it, 3 years ago. So big believer in pushing the regulators, but we need to understand them. And we need to understand the constraints of the industry. We have big systems today that operate capital markets that have been operating for many years. Yes, they're in for a change, but we're not going to change that in one day. And we have to do that step by step. And the step-by-step approach for me is how we look at further digitization in our business and what we do. And if you look at the diagram that was on the previous slide, I got it here back on the right, and you see the road and the journey that we take. We want to look at the digitization or the next steps in digitization, looking at blockchain for settlement, starting from the private space. We want to put that behind our private platform and then start to move step by step towards where you will have the highest transactional volumes, where you have the largest number of participants, that is the exchange itself. So, as I said, 2 key messages: separate the signal from the noise and everything that's happening around us. And there's a lot of great opportunities over there. 2, make sure that you approach the digitization in a well thought through way, understanding the environment in which you operate. And yes, disruption, but not destruction. That is what we have to be careful about. And trust me, I love disruption. And one key other element in the way that we approach all of that is reliable and proven partners. So those are the thoughts I wanted to share with you. I would like to finish by saying to the Exponential team, we are extremely proud to be able to list your digital asset fund on Deal Square, and making it there accessible to all types of investors. Remember what I said about Deal Square? Everyone can invest in your fund, including retail investors, non-accredited investors, because of the way that platform is enabling distribution. And 2, I would also like to congratulate you for your exponential vision and your exponential execution. Thank you.
Oh, that was beautiful. Thank you so much, Jos. That was very enlightening. I really think you hit it right on the head. Something we've been talking about internally quite a bit is building the bridges to the new digital economy, building the bridges to, again, not some disruption, but not destruction. I think that makes tremendous sense and is very aligned with what we're up to. So thank you for that. Okay, everybody, we're going to move on. We're running a little bit over time, which is totally great. The quality of content here is wonderful. Again, I'll ask if you have any questions for any of the panelists or for us, put those into the Zoom or Facebook chats. Again, you can also, if you're interested about learning more about the Digital Asset Fund or moving forward, exponential.io/DAF is the link you can visit. And let's move into our next speaker. So, coming to us from FrontFunder, Peter Paul Van Hoeken. Now, Peter Paul is the CEO of FrontFunder and Silver Maple Ventures. As Jos mentioned earlier, in partnership with Neo Exchange, he's also launched Deal Square, Canada's first online and digitized private placement platform for investment dealers and advisors. Finally, he sits on the advisory committee of the National Crowdfunding and FinTech Association, NCFA, as well as the Ontario Securities Commission. Here to talk to us today about transforming the private capital markets in Canada is Peter Paul Van Hoeken. Peter, thank you. Peter Paul, thank you for being here.
Thanks, Sonny. Thanks very much. So another Dutch name, this time a hyphenated first name. So just to keep it simple. So thanks again for the Exponential Group for this opportunity. This is very exciting to have been working with you guys in the last few years. I'd like to take you through indeed a bit of my journey and Front Funder's journey. And it started really with after having worked in banking for quite a few years. That kind of I like finance, but I was keen to go more down the entrepreneurial path. And as I relocated to Canada in 2010, I started working with small companies and helped them to raise capital. And so that was a time I experienced how challenging it is for small companies, for startups, for scale-ups to raise capital, and also how the general public is essentially locked out from investing in these companies, and if you think about programs like Dragon's Den in Canada or Shark Tank, and you see these guys in their comfy leather chairs with their stacks of money and they can invest. So how is it that the audience and the viewers of those programs, why can't they invest? So that's essentially the problem that we addressed with Front Funder, is how can we make investing in small companies and scale-ups accessible to everyone. So we've been, I'd say, really pioneering investing in private companies in Canada, and it started really in around 2014 to get this done, and by engaging with the regulators and get their comfort and from all market participants to bring the entire process online. And key is really to open it up indeed for all investors, so accredited investors, retail investors, any investors really. So if you could move to the next slide, please. So why we're doing this, and here's a couple of numbers, and even people in the industry don't realize really what's going on. But if you talk about the private markets, it's kind of, private is the new public in a way. There twice as much money is raised in the private markets versus the public markets, and they're growing twice as fast. The private markets in comparison to public markets, and over time, if you look at several reports, the average returns on private market investments is actually 3.5% point higher than in the public markets. So that combined with the trend that companies tend to stay private longer or don't go public at all, makes it even more urgent to unlock the private markets as an asset class for the wider public to invest in. So that's essentially what we've done with Front Funder, is to open up the private markets and to make it accessible for everyone. So if you could please go to the next slide. And as I said, the journey started really on the Front Funder side, building this platform that truly enables you to, as an investor, to explore investment opportunities, to initiate an investment, to sign a subscription documentation, transfer funds, everything, and it happens online. You could complete this investment in as little as 12 minutes, and you're basically done. You're a shareholder in the company, and so that's what we built over the years, and we realized that the challenge for the private markets, not only for the retail investor, but it's also for within the investment industry itself. And that is when Jos and I started a discussion last year, say, hey, the private markets is not only there's the problem on unlocking it for retail investors, but we can also make the private markets accessible and way more efficient for participants in the industry, in investment dealers, investment advisors, portfolio managers. And that's what we've done with the partnership with Neo, is essentially build Deal Square, which is Canada's first online private markets platform for the professional industry. So what you see here in this slide is essentially what we've done with FrontFunder and DealSquare is that we created a private markets ecosystem, basically platforms that open up private markets investments to any investor, and accredited, non-accredited investment dealers, advisors, portfolio managers, and that's what we built with DealSquare. Now, FrontFunder as essentially a participating dealer on DealSquare as well enables, as Jos mentioned, to open up investment opportunities to truly to everyone. So and an example, as you hear from Fred, is the Bitcoin fund that we launched today on FrontFunder and making it accessible to all investors. And of course, also what we're doing today with the launch of the digital asset fund on both FrontFunder and DealSquare. So next slide, please. So a bit of an overview of where we, how this journey went and where we are today. It's as I said, started in the end of 2014 with the launch of FrontFunder in June 15, after we went through quite an extensive let's say discussions with the regulator and got their approval, launched the platform, rolled out FrontFunder across Canada. We're now operating in 8 provinces, including Quebec. So FrontFunder is fully dual language. We've done now to date over 42 deals. We won a prize from the Private Capital Market Association for a deal for a ski resort that we opened up for all investors, for people that like to go there. We're now able to invest in this resort. This was a project in British Columbia. We've continuously advancing the platform, so we've automated it. We've obtained discretionary approval from the Canadian securities regulators to automate the so-called suitability. So we now a platform is able to make automated suitability decisions for investors, meaning that you can truly, as I indicated earlier on, complete an investment from start to finish, like buying a book online, essentially. Now, of course, the partnership with DealSquare that we kicked off last October, and we launched the first version last October, is very exciting to expand our private market solution into the investment industry. Today, with FrontFunder, we're now over nearly 16,000 users. We have nearly over 5,000 active investors. To date, we closed actually more than 39, already 43 deals to date, and raised over $14 million through the FrontFunder platform. So it's really it's exciting. I think that certainly given in the current circumstances where transaction essentially has to happen online, we believe that with FrontFunder and DealSquare that we have a very powerful solution to transact online, and we also see an opportunity now, actually right now, to help companies connect with investors and support the entire transaction. So we like to be the part of the solution in these challenging times, but we also believe moving forward that the digitization of finance will likely through this pandemic experience expedite and accelerate, and we're very proud to be a part of that. I'll leave it with that. I want to again thank the Exponential group for a great partnership. I'd like to congratulate you with the launch of the digital asset funds today on both FrontFunder and DealSquare. And on that note, thank you very much, and I hand it back to Sunny.
Peter, Paul, thank you. That was fantastic. What I'm seeing, Corey, you can maybe back me up on this. What I'm really loving and watching right now is there's this very common thread through the speakers we've had and the speakers to come of a real move towards democratization of these investments, and also inclusion and simplicity, just basic simplicity, not needing to go through the multiple hands that it went through previously, and being able to do this online from the comfort of your home. What do you think to that, Corey?
Yeah, I mean, just simplicity alone would make it all worthwhile. But when you include with that access, and not just access within a particular jurisdiction, but over time, what all of our goals are, universal global access. It's an exciting time to be alive. Frightening, but also exciting. Like JW often says, the world's biggest problems are the world's biggest opportunities. And I'm proud to be engaged in it with all of you. Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, moving forward as we continue. So we're going to be speaking with, our next speaker is Nick Cowan. Nick has over 30 years of experience in the investment industry. He was the former global head of equities at ING Barings, former global head of trading at ING Barings, and also the former head of trading at Bear Stearns. He is here today representing as the CEO of the GSX Group, and he is here to speak to us about presenting today's market with tomorrow's solution. Everybody, CEO of the GSX, Nick Cowan. Nick, thank you for being here.
Thanks, Sonny, and thanks for having me here. And note to oneself, I need to update that photo. If you could go to the next slide, please, so I don't have to look at myself. Be,
Absolutely. You have great hair. All right.
That'd be quite nice. Just a word about the Gibraltar Stock Exchange. We're a traditional exchange, but we're licensed to list traditional debt and funds, but also digital debt and funds. So we've got about 625 listings or so, over $1 billion. And we were looking at, really about 2 years ago, looking at the trading, implementing the matching engine trading side. And we just started to think, okay, look, this is just a dumb trade, because we're going to join the T+2 world, and there must just be a smarter way of doing this. You know, I've been doing this for 3.5 decades, and we've been members of futures exchanges and equity exchanges as an investment bank. And we just thought, okay, let's look at a smarter way to do this. And that really got us on the journey to a digital solution. And I think for us, when you look at the problems and the core issues, you know, I think there's a huge infrastructure which exists in the life cycle of a trade. So you have really the cost issue is one of the biggest challenges which we see that needs to be addressed. And there's a huge number, $750 billion or so gets spent every year in terms of that life cycle. We've also got interoperability. Most exchanges have evolved as an integrated FMI solution. They tend to be very geographical based. So I think that tends to limit issuers in terms of liquidity and investor access and investors to choice. Counterparty risk, I mean, particularly the unfortunate scenario that we find ourselves in today, we don't know what's the world's going to look like when we come out the other side, but counterparty risk is one of those issues that people don't think it's important until suddenly it is. And since Lehman's, counterparty risk has not been resolved. It's still potentially systemic. And in a T+2 environment, if something dislocates in that 2-day period, you can still be trying to join the dots a decade later. And one of the guys earlier talked about capital. It's absolutely right. It was Yost in terms of collateral. Every time a client places an order in an exchange, the broker dealer has to post capital with a central counterparty who basically collects that capital and ensures that the T+2 process basically happens. So there's an interesting stat, about 6% nominal of trades are failing at the moment. This is due to end this September because the authorities have had enough. So these CCPs and the CSDs, you're going to see a jacking up of rates, and the cost, if anything, is actually going to escalate in terms of that life cycle. So we were thinking, okay, well, look, we're a small exchange in a small jurisdiction. What is the place for us to be a T+2 exchange in the world? Probably not very exciting. Let's try and do something completely different. We looked at the technology that was out there a couple of years ago, and we couldn't really see anything that was compatible with the regulatory world that we live in, particularly with consensus models and also anonymity. Investment banks don't necessarily want the other investment bank to know what they're doing. So the problem with a lot of protocols is they don't guarantee anonymity. So we've been really working hard in terms of finding that solution to address the cost issue. Pan-jurisdictional interoperability, we think, is absolutely key. Eradicating counterparty risk and basically removing capital so that capital can be put to better use. And then we made the decision that actually we'd have to design and build our own chain, which we spent the best part of 2 years doing. We deployed it last year into our exchange, and this year we are looking to activate our trading venues, plural, which I'll cover in a little bit. But we see the market opportunity as just enormous, and we'll talk about stakeholders shortly in terms of who we're trying to benefit. So Sonny, next slide, please. Thank you. And I think that when you look at the digital asset world, you sort of crypto assets, etc. I think there's a lot of technology innovation that the regular financial markets have really failed to capitalize on and adopt. And I think a lot of that is because of it's the world as it continues in T+2 is a very profitable world for a lot of the stakeholders in the financial markets infrastructure vertical. And in fact, when you look at the good things of the digital asset world, obviously a lot of it is not compatible with regulation. So we took, worryingly, not a lot from the regulated world. We've actually took a lot of that we've learned from the digital asset world, and we put that together into how we see the world's digital securities evolving really, really quite quickly now that the technology is here in terms of 2020 and beyond. So there's a huge amount of opportunity to deliver on those, deliver solutions to those issues that I just highlighted. So next slide, Sonny. So we really, when you look at it as three issues for us, really the technology that we had to design and build. So we were interested last year because we approached the way, for those of you that don't know, you have to have a central securities depository for any security that enters a trading venue, certainly in Europe. It's all governed by a regulation. And so we approached all the CSDs in Europe and just said, look, we've got this great piece of technology. We're rolling out a matching engine. Can we hook up with you and digitally enable you? And either they weren't prepared to accommodate us or they just couldn't. So we've actually ended up now saying, you know what, the solution actually lies in, if we want to change the way the plumbing works, change the way securities settle to a T-Insta model, we actually have to be the CSD ourselves. So we are in application at the moment to be a CSD in Estonia. And our model basically does several things. I think number one is we try to achieve T-Instant, comply with all the regulatory and directives that we have to comply with. And that therefore enables something called settlement finality. So when you trade, you settle. The legal and beneficial title of the security is transferred at that point of trade, which obviously is highly complex. But that's really what we've been working on. And to do that, you really have to, I think, be the CSD. And that allows us to not just be the CSD to our network of exchanges, because we're now on our own private permission blockchain, but also allows us to be a CSD to any other digital exchange that wants to see the same benefits that certainly we've identified in terms of this solution. So we see digital assets very similar. We see a huge market in the private sector, about $5 trillion space there. But we see the digital assets in terms of new digital assets being issued. So equity, debt, and fund securities. In fact, we hope to close on our first digital VC that we're launching next week, and hopefully that will go through our grid, which you see in the middle on the bottom graphic. That's our STO platform. And we see digital assets basically as new securities being issued in tokenized form, the wrapping of traditional assets. So taking securities, putting them in a depository and putting a tokenized depository receipt, just like an ADR or a GDR. And actually, economically, that's where we see the huge, huge impact in terms of the efficiency we talked about earlier. So eradicating that counterparty risk and freeing up capital and basically slashing the costs. And then also bankable assets, we see that as a big market moving forward, particularly in real estate. And obviously, you heard from Rob earlier, there's a growing market there in terms of solutions to real estate solutions. And in terms of our chain, we built that, we've developed it, and that allows us to effectively deliver this solution. So we can try to remove all the friction that currently exists and automate a lot of the processes, and particularly in terms of reconciliation. If you just jump forward one more slide. And really, when you come to it in terms of language that hopefully everyone can understand, you really want to be able to provide investors ultimately with an app on their phone that allows them to buy a security. The fact that it's in digital form is actually irrelevant. All that does is basically just makes things super efficient. When you trade, you settle, the security appears instantaneously in your wallet. And it allows you, if you've got a bunch of exchanges, you can basically go in and place your order and you'll get the best price. And it doesn't have to be a GSX exchange. It could be an exchange that's on our CSD, that sits on top of our Stacks native chain. So we think investors are going to get a lot of access to choice. We think issuers as well. As I said earlier, I think interoperability in terms of country is really key. And I think global liquidity pools, and particularly if you're a private company and you're thinking about maybe public listing in a few years' time, basically you can just store everything. So all of your resolutions, you build your data room basically storing everything on our chain, and that just cuts out all of that extra expense that you're having to incur. You think about it in simple terms. So my mum owns loads of shares from the 80s when the Prime Minister in the UK, Margaret Thatcher, privatized basically the entire country. She sat on those shares for 30 years. She does nothing with them. And if and when she dies and I receive those shares, I've got to go and fill in 20 pages per share with the same registrar. It's just complete madness. You should be able to program a smart contract and put in beneficial title. And all those things just happen instantaneously. Brokers and investment banks, they obviously are a key beneficiary of this because they're ultimately going to reduce their costs by hopefully 70 to 80%, free up their balance sheets and remove counterparty risk. I think that's a great solution for everybody. And we've got this concept of investomers. You think about your Avios points holder. There's a lot of stats to back up that people tend to spend money in companies where they're shareholders, and yet actually a lot of companies have lost touch with their shareholders. And in fact, what we see is this bringing together via digital CSD and big data, that being able to get issuers to bring their shareholders who are also their customers together to basically exploit the investor concept. And that's just a sort of 1 + 1 = 3. And regulators love immutability and transparency. And as you've heard from all of the guests today, we've all had our own trials and tribulations with regulators. It's never a fast solution. You have to take them with you. But actually, if you can deliver a solution to them with full transparency, that tends to give people a lot of comfort in terms of the way forward. So we're really excited about where we see the market opening up this year. We're in application in Asia to turn on a trading venue in Asia and also a trading venue in Estonia with our CSD, as well as obviously being in Gibraltar. And then the ambition is working with our partners at Exponential next year. We'll be looking at North America to maybe come up with some type of solution there in terms of this model. And I think just in terms of, hopefully today, these presentations, we've all heard them actually ourselves for the first time today. And I think, I was at a Consensus conference standing at my booth, I think about 1.5 years ago, when JT and JW walked up to me and started chatting to me. And that turned into them getting on a plane and flying down to Gibraltar and getting to know us. And the one thing I've always been concerned about is when we try to articulate our vision to people, they just normally say you're completely crazy and it's just too big. And I think JW and JT were just, look, it's not big enough. Just everything needs to be digitalized. And you want every investor and every issuer to basically do this. So we've not only benefited from the guys coming in as an investor, we've also benefited from their wisdom and their vision. And we're working obviously hand in hand with Kyle now on a load of other stuff. So we are not just a portfolio company, we're absolutely partners. And as you saw today from the group here, it's a really smart vision because you get a bunch of companies together that you invest in who actually can do business with each other. And then you really do start to have exponential growth, which is very clever. So we're very fortunate and we're blessed. And thanks very much for having us today at GSX. And we look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you very much.
Oh, beautiful. Nick, thank you so much for sharing all that. I see yet again that narrative of simplicity being actually applied to a system that has been very cumbersome, certainly not set up for efficiency, actually leading into what the digital or finance will look like in the future. So this is very, very, very cool, very interesting. Thank you for sharing that.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Nick. That was amazing.
Mm-hmm. If anybody, again, I've been kind of scrolling at some of the questions there. Thank you guys for answering them. I know one of them has come up multiple times, is that people didn't realize that money was broken, quote unquote, money was broken. And this isn't really helping them understand how, value is exchanged and how we're looking to upgrade that. So very, very cool feedback. Thank you all for making comments. Continue to do so. If you have any in the Zoom chat or inside of Facebook, we have moderators there looking to get your questions answered. And again, if you're ready to take any action or find out more information, you can visit exponential.io/DAF.
Everybody who's registered for the Zoom will receive a follow-up email that will answer all the questions that that went unanswered and provide an opportunity to open communication.
Wonderful. Okay, stepping into our final speaker of the day, man of the hour. It's my pleasure to introduce James Wallace. James is a serial entrepreneur in the truest sense of the word. He opened his first business at 11 years old, his first storefront at 17, and operated over 20 businesses since then, mostly in the digital technology space. James believes deeply, and I know this to be true as I've worked with him, that it takes exponential thinkers to solve exponential challenges, much like the people who are on this webcast today. That led him to co-founding Exponential, a global digital financial services firm, and the world's first fully integrated early stage seed capital, growth stage capital, digital issuance, and trading platform. Here to talk to us today about how the emerging digital asset paradigm will create an era of global financial inclusion. James Wallace, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Sonny. Oh, what a great job. What a privilege. I do have to confess, though, I feel that the panelists have been profoundly unfair to me for being so exciting and engaging. What do you think, Corey? Was that fair?
Sure. Yeah, it's fair. It's been a really good webcast. A lot of amazing content. And you can see from the chat that people are absorbing it. It's been palatable. I expect yours to be nothing less than riveting. Yeah, no pressure, JW.
No pressure. I love it.
A big task in front of you, and no doubt you can rise to the challenge.
Yeah, like I said, the people in front of me were just extraordinary, and what an opportunity to build on top of what they've put forward. Each of them, I think, owning their spaces and doing extraordinary work. Exponential is, as they said, very fortunate to be investors, partners, shareholders, board members, etc. So, Sonny, next slide, please. This quote, and I think we should leave it up for a couple seconds here, is so important. I'm gonna read it straight away. 100% of the stocks and bonds trading on Wall Street today could be tokenized, and in 5 years, 100% of the stocks and bonds on Wall Street will be tokenized. And that is a quote from the former chairman and CEO of NASDAQ. That is a powerful, powerful statement from I think a very obviously reputable source in the capital markets world. That is what we're using to inform everything that we're building. Next slide, please. I think one of the initial things that we need to look at is, why are digital assets better? There's a lot here, so I'm just going to go through very quickly. Liquidity, there's early access to buy and sell. There isn't the same barrier that there would be in conventional capital markets, where enormous amounts of costs, enormous amounts of time are required to issue digital versions of the paper shares and trade them. The speed, transact at will and immediate settlement. Nick went into great detail to show how clumsy, slow, and costly the existing capital market system is. Accessibility, the fractionalization. A lot of people don't know, but most digital assets are fractionalized down to 18 decimal points. And what that means is, even if you had $1 trillion value at a single unit, fractionalizing down to 18 decimal points would allow you to actually buy pennies worth of that thing. Global, again, the technology, the distributed ledger technology that powers most digital asset issuances naturally allows for frictionless access across multiple jurisdictions. The compliance, proactive enforcement, tens of billions of dollars are spent by public companies creating and submitting to their regulators all that is required with current regulation. And the Stacks team in Singapore, which is part of the technology component of the GSX, has asked regulators, would they give up the requirement, theoretically, of course, would they give up the requirement to submit all this if they were simply given a total view of all activity in the jurisdiction? And there was sentiment that was the case. I think they just want to see things, and they want us to allow us to conduct our business and not be buried under paperwork. And the transparency, finally, definitive ownership and immutable record. This is something that does not exist in the electronic world. Up until the 60s or 70s, we had essentially a paper world. From the 70s until now, we've had an electronic world, and that is really just a facsimile, a representation of the paper. And the electronic version of things can be lost, stolen. In fact, I think it was Dole, the company that through their broker unwittingly sold a bunch of shares that didn't actually exist. So the digital representation of that security or that asset actually represents the asset. So those sorts of things, loss, theft, and selling things that don't exist are not simply not possible. Next slide, Sunny, please. Our purpose is significant, create massive transformation. And we do that by investing in companies that alleviate suffering and expand human potential. And we believe that by doing that, ultimately, we will help usher in an era of meaningful living for everyone everywhere. Next slide, Sunny. One of the most important things that we can do, and one of the central points of focus for us is financial inclusion. Anything that we can do that would push forward an opportunity for someone on either side of things, either the investor who wants to put their money to work or contribute to things that get built in the world, and then obviously on the investment side, the issuer, the founder, trying to raise capital. We want to assist in removing barriers to that. So for example, in the US, 98% of people are excluded from early stage investments. Typically, you need to be an accredited investor to do that. In Canada, it's 96%. That's access to investments. Obviously, on the issuer side, there is a problem where investment bankers and venture capital prohibit easy access to issuances and to finding distribution and investors. Obviously, Front Funder discussed some of the ways that they're seeking to reduce the friction and allow more value creators to issue cool things into the world. Another part of financial inclusion is banking, obviously, access to the banking network and the payment network. Just one quick stat, Indonesia, 66% of their 250 million people population is unbanked. Most other countries, I would actually say, are in similar positions. One of the most difficult realities that we're faced with, where if we look at Silicon Valley, they have consolidated power around venture capital, early stage investment, and I think there's about 600,000 accredited investors in the US with a population of about 330 million. So that's just over 2%. Only about 3,000 of those people use that exemption to invest in early stage startups. Some invest directly, many just contribute to a venture capital fund. At the core of those funds, there's an investment committee, and the head of that investment committee typically is a rich white man. And what happens is that those people are often, determining who gets funded. And the reality is that when that determination is made who gets funded, those things are the things that are built in the world. So these people are actually responsible for determining the world that we live in 3 to 5 years from now. And to understand the digital asset fund, you have to understand Exponential. So next slide, Sunny, please. Exponential is a global digital financial firm. I think it's really important to explain. JT alluded to the fact at the top of the hour how much we've contributed to this. We really started I started as a serial tech entrepreneur. I've been building technology since 1993. Most of the technology I built didn't work. A few things did work. That led to some capital and some advice. And I decided at one point that I could do more in the world if I stopped building things and operating things myself and instead just became a full-time investor. Meeting JT, we decided that we were going to consolidate everything, all of our assets, all of our time, all of our experience, and essentially build a venture capital fund that was going to have impact in its core and was going to enable access to a meaningful living. Over a quick period of time, we invested actually, as JT said, several million in the operations company, building a global structure, making investments in things like 3iQ and the GSX, Front Funder as well. We quickly realized, though, that we needed more people internally to make sure that all of the services for the entire life cycle of a venture were in-house and therefore trustworthy. So if you look on the screen, you can see left to right a sort of capital markets life cycle support system. The ventures component is early stage, 100,000 to 5 million. The distribution in the middle, capital in green there, represents typical investment banking, 5 million to 50 million. And these two teams are working together to ensure that as many people as possible are able to bridge the gap from early stage to to more significant rounds of investing. In the traditional world, venture capital funds and investment banks typically do not coordinate. And there's a cliff there. And I think a lot of the 90% of people that don't make it from early stage to growth stage are simply not able to navigate what the investment banks require. And simply maybe because of the fact that they don't know what they require. So we have created, by bringing that in-house, a nice constructive tension between ventures and our capital team. And then on the far right, it's not always, it doesn't always come last, because we're playing with the idea of nano IPOs and helping people to do primary issuances early on. But the liquidity component is represented by our markets team, who engages stock exchanges around the world to through their member firm status and sponsor advisor status, help our investments and other third parties be listed on their exchange to find that liquidity that they're looking for. The fund is where we've essentially consolidated all of the capital that we seek to raise internally and distribute to our investments. And I'll talk a little bit about that later. Next slide, Sunny. Just a quick comment on this. It's a big slide, I know, but we'll just look at the left side, which is it's really important to understand, in addition to, and you'll see the familiar colors, orange, green, and blue at the top, those three teams really nurturing the entire capital markets cycle for our investments. As the stock exchange or the exchange, the markets team looks to digitize the shares and list, they're focused on that first layer, which investable assets. Are they ready? There was a comment from Yas earlier about, should they go public? Should that event happen? Obviously, everyone's really excited and everyone wants to do it. Oftentimes, they should not do that thing. So the markets team will coordinate and make sure that they are prepared, and then issue digital securities and list when they're ready. And that goes a long way to high quality assets. Underneath that is the regulatory and compliance part. And I think for anyone in the space, the digital asset space, you saw very early on, 2-3 years ago, even in the quote unquote security token or digital security space, people were bringing platforms to market that didn't have, they weren't issuing digital securities on high quality assets. They certainly had no intelligence around regulatory and compliance. And so we have learned over the last 2 or 3 years that no asset should be created or listed or traded unless all three are components and qualities of that asset. So high quality regulatory compliance supported by wonderful systems that enable global trade. Next slide, Sonny, please. Again, just a big slide here, but I think it's really important to point out just the size, the reality of the situation. A tiny amount of digital assets have been issued. And I think before I go into describing the slide, I need to say really quickly, it's important to understand that right now, all the assets are still paper. They're still conventional. They're issued, created in a very conventional way, traded, listed, sold in a very conventional way. And our digitization of those assets at this time, at least until we're in a digital native situation where these assets can be created digital first, we are essentially just issuing a digital representation of that physical asset, allowing it to maybe leave its jurisdiction, allowing it to access markets that are open 365, 24/7, allowing for cross-jurisdictional trade. But all of the assets that are being issued by people that know what they're doing right now, these digital assets, are being issued against things that actually exist. So these are not, as Yas alluded to, the ICO craze where these are tokens based on nothing. All of these digital assets are connected to actual real world assets. Now back to the screen here, we're talking about hundreds of trillions of dollars worth of assets to be digitized. And the moment that things are digitized, those things become much more valuable. And there's a slide coming up where we'll quickly look at some of the key characteristics and traits of things when we enhance them. And digitization does that, it just increases the value. So I think we should move on. Next slide, Sonny. the amount of costs involved, we've read several reports from regulated entities that have revealed that 1/5 to 1/10 of capital market costs are essentially, pardon me, we can reduce the cost of the trading in capital markets and trading venues to 1/5 or 1/10. That a lot of these legacy services that are used and required, and to be honest, I think very necessary in the old capital markets to provide support to the trade and the way that we choose to trade it with transfer agents and custodians and clearing and settlement services and so on. Many or most of those services are just simply not required. The technology itself does that work. And with the security and the immutability of it, we don't require third parties to validate. As Nick pointed out with the 4 Cs, all of those things are resolved. And so all of those things are provided by companies that charge for those services. And these are some of the costs that are represented. So there's a possibility of $702 billion, a big portion of that, if not all of that, simply going away by the digital economy, global digital assets marketplace adopting these services. Next slide, Sunny. I think alternative investment in a traditional vehicle, I just want to say again, one of the things that excites me the most, and I relied on really smart people around me to help me understand this, help us understand this. I don't take credit for this at all. The composition of the fund, it was really important for us to put forward something that felt normal, that felt accessible, that felt familiar, and then to layer on all of these what the conventional capital markets industry calls alternative investment. It's actually traditional with alternative enhancements, but we're really excited about how we're able to facilitate the needs of people that want a fairly boring investment while also exciting people that are looking for something a little bit more than that. Next slide, Sonny. We don't have enough time to dig into all this, but on the left-hand side, you'll see there's two things to really point to here. One is the type of assets. It's very difficult to get all of these assets in one investment. We've managed to do that. Like I said, in part, it's part of our strategy to de-risk by diversifying. It's also, again, part of our strategy to help people be comfortable. And these are all asset classes that they're very familiar with. And in our investment committee, there's an industry leader representing every single one of these, which is very exciting to acquiesce to their expertise and be able to get insights on the leading edge. And these people are not only leaders in the conventional world, but they're looking at digitizing as well in those spaces. So we're learning a lot from them. On the bottom left, block attributes. This is what I was referring to earlier: liquidity, diversification, custody solution, regulatory compliance, and a lot of the attributes of portability, divisibility, immutability, and so on. The digitization of the asset enhances all of those things, so it immediately makes it more valuable. Next slide. The digital asset fund advantages, obviously every fund needs to differentiate itself. And so when we started asking ourselves, okay, why are we different? We know we're different, but we have to explain it. These 5 things popped out to us as definitive advantages, some more definitive than others, but nonetheless very important. That diversified range was really important to us. We worked very hard to source digital assets for each one of those with high quality underlying paper equivalents, obviously. An experienced team, some of the smartest people in asset management I've ever met as a technologist and a venture capitalist. Essentially, asset management and capital markets for that matter were fairly new to me. So we've gone out of our way to make high quality investments in companies that are on the edge and able to feed back to us information. We've also invested heavily internally as well, scouting the planet to find the smartest people and somehow convincing them to come in. Unique opportunity, the scarce digital assets component. We've essentially created what amounts to a global VC fintech engine and ecosystem. Through our investments, through some acquisitions, we've been able to create something that is full circuit, that is able to actually do all the things. And referring back to the platforms, not that long ago, people were issuing one component of many, expecting it either to work or people not to be disappointed when it didn't work, which we know is silly now. So this is definitely a unique opportunity. The exponential thinking, Salim at the top of the hour drove that point home. Our name is quite literally exponential. These were became very apparent to me as a technologist how important they were. My successes were probably almost perfectly correlated to how frequently I acknowledged the exponential principles and focused on leverage and focused on things also like the lean startup and agile development process. Socially conscious, we, as Corey said, the right thing and the smart thing are now the same thing. We believe that all investments should be net neutral at worst and probably always have a net positive. And so our intention is to always make sure that everything we do, whether it's internally or within our investments, are good for people, planet. Next slide, please. The 5 levels of alpha, and that's a term, sorry for the capital markets term, that just means how's it differentiated from the competition. And this is where I think, for me at least, this is the most exciting part, or how we sum up all the exciting parts, I should say, in one slide. And I think it'll be a wrap after this. The digitization enhances the value of an asset. Straight away, our paper assets, which the investment thesis, I think, is very sound, very strong, just with the paper, but the ability to digitize these assets, and as I said, port them elsewhere, trade them, increases the value. The next is the scouting the best investments in the world that we are taking and putting into the fund. The ability that we had when because we focus on the venture team first of networking and flying to all 4 corners, quite literally, of the planet to meet the smartest people building the most amazing thing in this emerging fintech world allows us to also make these investments. So clearly it's intelligent for us to hook these up, partner with Exponential to do our business, but we also, whenever possible, invest. The active management portion, most funds are passively managed, I've come to learn as a venture capitalist. That was a bit shocking to me, but nonetheless, that's how it is. So whenever possible, whenever it is beneficial to the investment, we take a board seat. At the very least, we answer the phone when they call, which what I've learned, most fund manufacturers and asset managers, that's not common. We're very excited to help them enhance their business performance. And the fourth is one of the ways that we do that to help them grow their market share is connecting them. So, we by having investments in trading venues and digital banks and digital asset lenders, we're able to understand how each one of these things connects to the other. And the learnings that they may have as well are brought in and then distributed. Very often, though, they actually want to do business with each other, which helps them grow their value propositions within their market and therefore grows their market share. And the last is making markets by listing our investments. We, as I said, at the right time, our markets team connects with each one of these investments and helps determine how do we digitize your cap table at the very least. And then what does it look like if and when should we potentially make this available to third parties to buy? That again creates markets that didn't exist before, which for the record I think is very important to put forward. This digital asset paradigm shift is not simply about making things more efficient, making things cheaper, making things faster. It's also about, or through that, pardon me, the ability to actually create markets that never existed before, because the barrier to entry is so low, obviously with quality control, making sure that high quality assets and security and protections are in place on the trades. But new things that never existed before will be provided, high quality things will be provided to the world, and the world will determine what, with their dollars, will vote on what gets built and how the world is shaped around us. Next slide, Sonny, please.
Incredible. And on to a big moment.
Oh, so it's time to launch the Digital Asset Fund. I'm actually really excited to see that ticker, DIGTL. Whoever came up with that's pretty smart. Kyle, thank you very much for that. And as Kyle said, the smart thing and the right thing are now the same thing. And I think with that mindset, we can migrate society to an era of prosperity and meaning. And I think with the launch of the Digital Asset Fund, that bridge to the era is now open for everyone. And I really hope all of you can join us. Beautiful. We are live. The Digital Asset Fund is live and investable.
please check it out. That's our ticker, DIGTL. I want to take a moment to thank everybody for being here. And also, if you're interested in finding out more information about the digital asset fund beyond what we've talked about here, perhaps a more concise version of that, you can head over to exponential.io/DAF. It's shown on the screen there. There you'll find more information about the fund, about Exponential, how you can contact us or get a hold of one of our people, get your questions answered. There's a whole wealth of information, and then also actually invest if that's something that you're interested in doing. The information to do that is labeled out there. So thank you for being here. If you are a member of the media, take a moment. We are about to end this webcast, which again, thank you so much for everybody for being here. If you
We went over by almost 100% and more than half the people stuck around. That was amazing. Thank you guys so much for spending your day with us.
Amazing. Thank you guys so much, guys and girls, so much. Now, again, if you are a member of the media, right after this, there is a secondary Zoom room specifically for media Q&A. You would have got that URL in your original registration email. So if you got that and you're a member of the media, please head over to that room now where James Wallace, our co-CEO.
May take a few minutes for us to get it up. So when you see this come down, head over there.
Perfect. So yeah, we're going to head over there. And again, if you jumped off early or if you don't have time for the media Q&A room, fantastic. No worries. You can reach out to me if you're interested in any kind of direct conversation with James Wallace or any of the other Exponential team. And you can reach me at Sunny, SUNNY, at exponential.io. Sunny at exponential.io. Thank you everybody again for being here. Guest panelists, Corey, James Wallace, everybody.
Salim, Rob Richards. Fred, Jos, Peter Paul, the man so nice they named him twice, Nick Cowan, and of course, James Wallace, and JT for jumping on early and giving us a little intro, and Kyle as well. Everyone was amazing today. Thank you so much.
Thank you all kindly. See you in the media and see you in the media room if you're heading there.
Bye, everybody. Stay safe. Wash your hands.